Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it's going to spend its whole life thinking it was stupid. Very, very smart man said that. That man just happened to be Albert Einstein. And I think it's a very great analogy and a very great example on the state of our education system. And it's a great segue into what my ultimate point is today. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about the educational system and why I believe the education system is flawed, specifically the public education system, and why I believe the complete overhaul and privatization is what is needed to rejuvenate our education system. Our public education system is failing terribly right now. We have no teachers, very little funding. I know most of you can attest to it, but when I was growing up and in high school, when it hit really bad, there were kids in my classroom that were sitting on their butts because we didn't have a chair. My senior year, my last semester senior year, I had a huge final that I couldn't take, and we couldn't take because there wasn't enough toner to print out the test. So it's no secret that our education system has come on some tough times in terms of money, and there needs to be a solution. And there have been some proposed, none of which I believe is more relevant and more exciting than the idea of a full privatization of the education system. So in this short speech, I'm going to discuss with you some of the major problems with the public education system and why I believe that privatization will help come in and fix that and create a much brighter future in terms of our educational system. The public school system is a disaster as we speak. And it starts with the kids that are going to school. A statistic came out in 2012 that said 22% of all children attending public schools are in poverty. So think about that. 1 out of 5 kids in a public school system is impoverished. That's a pretty staggering stat to think about. Why do I bring up the stat? Because it reflects on the schools. When you have kids that are impoverished and you have kids that come from, with special needs or learning disabilities, more programs are required to be created for the school in order to help these kids coming in. And like I said, with the public school system being so impacted, all these kids are coming to school, or fewer and fewer schools because there just isn't that much opportunity in terms of education available right now. So these kids are convalescing on these schools, and what's that doing? It's creating a disaster in terms of our spending because we can no longer focus the small amount of money we get from the government into those strict education systems. We have to now send them on food for the kids that are coming in impoverished. And this isn't the kids' fault. Let me just go ahead and say that. I'm not blaming the kids for poverty or putting our schools into the state that they're in. What I'm simply saying is one of the issues with the public school system is it doesn't deal with impoverished kids very well. On top of that, post-economic collapse in 2009, the funding for public school systems and education in general has dropped dramatically. In fact, we've seen an over 17% decrease in the amount of money that schools are getting. So what's that say? It says that we have a public school system now that cannot deal with impoverished kids because they have a lack of money, and it doesn't get enough money to provide the proper facilities and the proper needs for the kids to get a proper education. So how do you get more money? You raise taxes. And one of the great ways to raise taxes and the true paradoxes of our system is that in order to fund education, because we need help funding education, we need kids that can access education, we charge more for education. Our tuition prices have increased by well over 200% since 1994. We've seen a steep increase that has no sign of stopping. So what's the solution? We're going to look at privatization. There have been other ideas, announced and proposed, but I believe that the one that can solve all is privatization. If we look at what privatization would entitle, essentially the schools that are public would no longer be accountable to the government. They would in fact be accountable strictly to a company or an owner, somebody who owns the school and runs it. Now, that might seem like not that big of a change, but let's look at something that would happen, all right? This right here is my iPhone, okay? Let's say the government owns my iPhone and I'm trying to buy the iPhone from my government, all right? The government can charge whatever it wants for the iPhone. Why? Because it exclusively owns it. The government essentially has a monopoly on the iPhone, and whatever it feels appropriate, it's going to charge it. It doesn't matter about handling how much it costs. They're simply going to charge a flat rate because they have control over it. What is privatization going to do? Privatization gives somebody else this iPhone. It gives a bunch of other people access to the iPhone at the very least, and that in turn creates an environment in which competition is driven. And what does competition do? Competition has forever driven down prices. When you have something in abundance, which education can be because everybody wants to get a good education, it drives it down. In fact, a recent study at the Harvard School of Economics came out, and it said that within a year, if we were to go into a complete overhaul and privatize education, we could see as much as 140% drop in education prices. On top of that, this new competition is going to do something very important that we don't currently have. And it's going to create more schools that are going to be created in order to train people in a profession schools, mechanics, plumbers, electricians. The increased competition is going to create an environment that not everybody can get into these elite schools, and therefore they're going to have to figure out what they want to do with their lives, creating these specialization schools. And in general, people that deserve to get into the higher level schools will because of the competition, and those that don't want to go to school don't have to be brought along by standards that the state or government institutes, and rather can just go to their own school and learn how to work on cars, learn how to work on pipes, and make a living off that, which a lot of kids want to do anyway. In fact, it's found that over 60% of kids interviewed in a specific polls said that they would go to a training school, vocational school, in order to further their career. That all being said, I think it's time we look at the education system. I think it's extremely flawed, and I feel like without true change and without truly uncovering and unmasking what's going on, we can never fully support our kids, and I believe that privatization is the only way to go about that. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it.